Some people never break. They don't drift. They don't hesitate. They don't disappear after a few bad days. While everyone else resets, restarts, and makes new promises, they keep going without visible effort. No excuses. No internal debates. No relapse. And that's exactly why they don't feel inspiring. They feel unnatural. People don't admire this level of discipline the way they admire talent or luck. Instead, it creates discomfort. It makes others uneasy because it exposes how fragile most habits really are. When someone shows up with machine-like consistency, it forces an uncomfortable comparison that no one asked for. This isn't motivation. Motivation fades. This is something colder and far more permanent. A system designed to remove choice entirely, where quitting doesn't feel hard, it simply doesn't exist. But here's the part no one talks about. This system demands a price most people will never be willing to pay. And once you understand what that price is, you'll see why this kind of discipline changes who you are forever. Almost everyone follows the same pattern. A strong start filled with energy and confidence, followed by small excuses, missed days, and quiet justifications. Then comes the reset. A new week, a new plan, the same promise, repeated again and again. It feels personal, like a flaw in your character, but it isn't. People try to fix this with tools, habit tracking apps, streak counters, rewards, accountability partners. They work for a few days, sometimes a few weeks, and then the cycle returns. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't want it badly enough, and not because you lack discipline. The real problem runs deeper. It's the way the human brain is designed to protect energy, avoid discomfort, and renegotiate commitments the moment resistance appears. Motivation was never built to last. That's why, long before modern psychology existed, certain cultures stopped relying on it entirely and built systems that worked without it. He was a modern professional by every definition. Intelligent, capable, and outwardly successful. From the outside, there was no reason he shouldn't have been disciplined. Yet behind the scenes, the same pattern followed him everywhere. He could start anything, but he could never stay with it. Exercise lasted a few weeks. Meditation faded after days. Books were bought with excitement and forgotten just as quickly. The frustration wasn't ignorance. He knew exactly what to do. He had read the advice, watched the videos, and understood the logic. That made it worse. Knowing the path and still failing to walk it creates a quiet kind of anger that builds over time. Every restart felt like proof that something was broken. He tried systems, he tried rewards, he tried tracking progress. Nothing held, until one moment changed everything, when he encountered a principle far older than self-help books or productivity science, and realized consistency was never supposed to rely on effort at all. The breakthrough came from an ancient practice developed long before motivation was ever studied. Its core rule was simple, almost unsettling in how absolute it was. Practice must continue without gaps. Not most days, not when it feels right, without gaps. The moment a gap appears, the system breaks, and the old patterns return. This is where most modern goals fail. Goals are reversible. You can delay them, renegotiate them, or quietly abandon them without consequences. Irreversible commitments work differently. They don't rely on effort, they change identity. Instead of trying to act disciplined, you become the kind of person who acts that way automatically. Public declaration plays a critical role here. When a commitment is witnessed by others, the brain stops treating failure as a private inconvenience and starts registering it as a threat to identity and to status. At that point, quitting becomes more painful than continuing. If you're serious about changing how you operate, this is the moment where things stop being about improvement and start becoming about who you are. Even with pressure and public commitment, the battle wasn't over. Discipline was still colliding with biology. The body doesn't care about promises or identity. When it's tired, it wants rest. When discomfort appears, it looks for escape. Social pressure can silence excuses, but it can't stop physical resistance. That's where fixed timing becomes a weapon. Every day, people waste mental energy deciding when they'll act, morning or night, before work or after. Each decision drains focus and opens space for delay. A fixed time removes the debate entirely. There is no choice to weigh, no energy spent negotiating. The goal isn't to optimize the perfect schedule, it's to eliminate time as a variable. In the beginning, the body resists hard. Mornings feel heavy, movement feels forced, but beneath that resistance, something subtle starts to shift. When the timing never changes, the body begins to prepare automatically, and the first signs of discipline without effort quietly appear. Most advice says the same thing. Mix it up. Follow your mood. Keep things interesting so you don't burn out. It sounds reasonable, but it's exactly where consistency dies. Every time you introduce variety, you invite choice back into the system. Push-ups or cardio, reading or meditation, more time or less. These micro-decisions reopen negotiation, and negotiation always favors comfort. An identical daily structure removes that weakness. The same actions in the same order for the same amount of time. Boredom isn't a flaw here, it's a feature. Boredom starves the mind of options and leaves it with only execution. This is where resistance peaks. The mind rebels, demanding novelty and stimulation. It calls the process robotic, unhealthy, unsustainable. But that noise is the last defense of an old pattern fighting for survival. When variety disappears completely, the mind has nothing left to argue with, and that's when surrender begins. The change doesn't arrive with excitement or celebration, it arrives quietly. One morning, the body moves before the mind has time to object. The routine begins without planning, without debate, without effort. What once required force now happens automatically, as if someone else is running the controls. At this stage, motivation is no longer part of the equation. The habit doesn't need encouragement or reminders because it isn't being chosen anymore. Repetition in the same context trains the brain to hand control over to deeper systems designed for efficiency. Action replaces intention. This is the moment most people misunderstand discipline. It isn't something you sustain forever through strength. Strength runs out. Discipline works because it eventually disappears. It's replaced by automation. You don't feel disciplined. You simply feel normal doing what once felt impossible, and that's when consistency becomes permanent. When life tries to break the chain, this is where most systems collapse. Not on ordinary days, but when life disrupts the pattern. Illness hits, travel steals your routine, schedules fracture. This is where relapse usually begins because perfection becomes impossible and people decide it's not worth trying at all. Perfection is the enemy of consistency. Waiting for ideal conditions creates gaps, and gaps are where old habits return. The solution isn't intensity, it's continuity. Doing something, even imperfectly, keeps the chain alive. There's a critical difference between rest and retreat. Rest is intentional and planned. Retreat is emotional and reactive. One protects momentum, the other destroys it. Momentum matters more than performance. When the system prioritizes continuation over quality, the practice survives chaos. And when the practice survives chaos, relapse loses its power. The final layer removes the last point of failure. Instead of reacting to obstacles in the moment, every disruption is solved in advance. When travel happens, there is already a reduced version. When illness appears, there is already a minimum action. No thinking, no debate, no stress. The response is automatic. This is where willpower becomes unnecessary. Decisions are expensive under pressure, but pre-decided responses cost nothing. The system continues regardless of conditions because it was designed for imperfection from the start. That certainty creates calm. Anxiety fades because the brain knows the answer before the problem even appears. The practice no longer feels fragile. It feels inevitable. When people start feeling uncomfortable, the shift becomes visible to others before it feels dramatic to you. People start commenting. They call it extreme. They say it isn't healthy. They suggest slowing down or being more balanced. These reactions aren't concern, they're discomfort. Your consistency exposes the gap between intention and execution, and that gap makes people uneasy. By now, identity has fully shifted. Consistency isn't something you try to maintain, it's the default state. Skipping feels stranger than continuing. When others feel unsettled by how reliably you operate, it's not a warning sign. It's confirmation. Fear is the natural response to something they don't believe is possible. This was never about pushing harder. It was about becoming someone who no longer needs to push at all. If this changed how you see discipline, stay connected and follow what comes next. In the comments, make your declaration clear. The discipline that scares others is the only kind that lasts.